Hi, this is a recording of my talk delivered at the Association of Jewish Librarians conference in Boston on June 20th, 2018. I'd like to discuss with you the new Jewish visual iconography, the visual midrash, that I've been developing for nearly 30 years. Words, color, and gold fuse here into an iconography expressing our most profound Jewish spirituality and values in a way that makes sense to all of us who live our daily lives in the modern world. Many of us struggle to find personal spirituality without abandoning the empirical, science-based intellectual culture that we all inhabit every time we check the weather forecast, nurse a child's scraped knee, or turn on our computers. In the face of these side-by-side mindsets, one of my own deepest concerns, and I'm sure many of you share this, is the constant societal pressure of secularization, the shrinkage of expressly Jewish meaning in the lives of much of our community, despite the fact that many around us strain for connection with something greater. The illuminated books I'm about to share with you, infused with all the joy and intimacy of this essential Jewish cultural art, can nourish the souls of our adults and children who strive to inhabit both the secular and spiritual worlds with integrity. Their paintings convey our immutable values in a sensually pleasing, non-didactic way that readers can absorb at their own pace. I'm going to focus on how this visual midrash works in my three most recent books: Arise, Arise, Deborah, Ruth, and Hannah from the end of 2012, Kabbalat Shabbat, The Grand Unification, 2016, and All the World Praises You, an illuminated adaptation of Perek Shirah, organized as an Aleph Bet book that appears in mid-July of 2018, just a couple of weeks from the date that I'm recording this. I need to thank Sharon and Steve Lieberman for their generous support for the publication of each of these works. Let's start by looking at some Jewish women role models. Now, Gal Gadot is a wonder, and I love the movie. And in Jewish education nowadays, she's pointed out as a great role model for Jewish girls. But Wonder Woman, of course, is utterly imaginary, and not even, as are many of our comic book heroes, a product of the great early 20th century Jewish cartoonists. So let's look at a biblical Wonder Woman, one of the very earliest formative tales we have, Debra. At Right Dvarah listens to the local farmers and herders' anxious complaints, most likely begging for relief from Canaanite depredations on their crops and flocks. The clouds above allude to God's leadership of the people. The palm, drawing upon Psalm 92, apart from being the given landmark for her court, symbolizes her righteousness. The lily draws upon a famous midrash in which the rabbis use a fragrant pink lily in a ruined orchard to represent the value of the Ten Commandments in the corrupt human world. And we all know these plain clay jars from Israeli archaeology, yes? You see one in the front corner. Throughout the book, these jars serve as barometers of the people's mood. If all's well, the jar is upright and intact. But if the public mood has shifted to anxiety or fear, the jars are, like this one, cracking or broken. Here you see this one spilling its wine. At left, this real Wonder Woman, assisted by her general, marshals her ragtag bunch of farmers and herders, probably armed with little more than primitive bronze sickle swords and knives, against the Canaanite general Sisera's 900 heavy, technologically advanced iron chariots. So picture this. For the first time since entering the land, someone, a woman no less, has put together a force uniting multiple tribes. She already had better creds than her general Barak. She waited for just the right moment, and I believe that this was early winter, when she could gamble that the rains might begin. The stars actually give a hint at this, but I'll leave you to read that in the book. Hoping for a flash flood, she drew Sisera and his heavy chariots to chase her band into a wadi, a dry stream bed. Her bold gamble paid off. In a miracle compared to the parting of the Red Sea, the rains began with a rush, so all those iron chariots were suddenly mired in a sea of mud, and Israel's farmers and herders could use their sickles and knives to pick off the mighty warriors of Chatzor. Dvorah even had the chutzpah to celebrate her and Yael's victory with an epic poem, the first recorded full Israelite women's epic, indeed one of the very most ancient chunks of Tanakh that we have. At left, we see the flood. Trapped soldiers and horses sink under the waves. The eagle reminds us of God, who rescued us as though on wings of eagles. There's a great midrash about the eagle involved here. And shooting stars show us how the stars fought from their courses. Dvorah is a genuine Jewish role model for our girls and all of us, for her careful and imaginative planning, courage, and leadership. As the fused text and visual midrash show us, Dvorah's qualities are an integral part of our actual Jewish culture, not a modern fiction. Let's move on and look at Ruth and Naomi, and discuss some other daily values modeled for us by our biblical women. We'll see how the iconography in the paintings reveals the subtleties of their tales. So, look to the left. Megillat Ruth begins in personal tragedy. The three women are devastated and impoverished by the deaths of their men, and I painted their emotions much as I saw the scene around me in the first moments after cancer took the life of my first husband in our family room turned home hospice, a kaleidoscope of broken shards. The flies, the screams, the weapons, the decaying wall here, though, allude to these men's selfishness and irresponsibility. Wealthy landowner Elimelech has abandoned Yehudah in its time of famine and fled to nearby Moab, leaving his own people to ruination. At right, entreat me not to leave you, nor from following after you, for wherever you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Naomi slumps on a stone, exhausted, the rabbis tell us, as the ashes of sacrifice. Yet Ruth's devotion, defying all common sense, gives her courage. The palm tree speaks to both women's tzedek, their righteousness. The crane, the chasidah, symbolizes Ruth's chesed, kindness. The plants and feathers embedded in the painted mosaic allude to the subtle values of the women's love for one another. For instance, in Midrash on Shemot, Exodus, roses symbolize humility. In Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, beauty. The caper blossoms that you see in two corners draw upon a little passage in the Babylonian Talmud in which the caper plant, the same weedy stuff that we see growing out of the Western Wall in Jerusalem today, embodies Israel's ability to persevere and flourish through adversity with nothing more than God's unseen support. The lily we discussed a moment ago. The wheat is obviously sustenance, and the feathers again allude to God's rescue of us as though on wings of eagles. So you begin to see now how I use this iconographic vocabulary over and over again, always explaining it in commentary materials, always building and adding with each project, always adding layers of subtle meaning to the narrative message of the Illumination and its text. Hannah's tale may come to us from a generation before the establishment of the Israelite monarchy, a couple of generations after Ruth. It may be another step in the founding of the monarchy, but its themes of personal depression, the discovery of private prayer, recovery, gratitude to God for surviving trauma, and finally, the passing on of family values, speaks to our everyday concerns and values. In the painting at the left, at the beginning of her story, Hannah is lost in her own greenish bubble of depression. Crushed by the second wife's taunts, she cannot perceive her husband's love. Now, in his paraphrase of the biblical tale, the first century writer, Pseudo-Philo, has Peninnah compare herself to a full fruiting olive tree, always a symbol of nobility, of course. She ridicules Hannah as a withered, leafless tree. And we see those two different trees arching over each woman. Hannah sunk in depression, Peninnah reveling in her many children. Now, you can probably already guess that those eagle feathers surrounding prefigure divine rescue. As we know, while her husband makes the sacrifices at Shiloh, Hannah enters the shrine, sinks down into a seat, and rocks back and forth, murmuring her own silent prayer to God, inventing our tradition of silent prayer that has outlasted animal sacrifice. At right, you see the words of Hannah's prayer rising like scent from a perfume flask between Hannah's hands. Song of Songs Rabbah compares sweet perfume to the fragrance of the sacrifices that so please God. And we can extend this metaphor to the words of our prayer. We know the story. Hannah bears her first child, Shmuel, God has heard. And here she raises him to the dawn in triumphant celebration. Those clay casks, they're now full and upright and perfect as Hannah heals, having given birth to this remarkable man. The micrography that you see in the border of this painting is part of a fabulous poem by the late Bible scholar Tikva Merkensky, in which she compares the struggle of childbirth to early Israel's wars. Finally, let me point out an element of this story that I have never before seen discussed, and that is how Hannah passes on her family's values of Jewish leadership to young Shmuel. Look at the little shirt in the corner of the lower corner of the painting at the right. The end of the tale tells us that Hannah made a little robe for her firstborn every year and gave it to him when they met during the annual sacrificial season at Shiloh. Now, yes, this is very sweet, and you can imagine any mother wanting to do that. A mother who'd been willing to give away her son this way, to good purpose. Now, but when Tanakh mentions clothing, especially the passing on of clothing, you can bet that something important is happening. Think here of Aaron's ceremonious passing the priestly garments on to his son before his own death, passing on not only linen, but far more importantly, the priestly tradition. And that's just what's happening here. Through each year's little shirt, Hannah passed her and Elkanah's values of devotion and leadership to Samuel to clothe him as he grew into Israel's great leader, just as we all strive to pass our Jewish values on to our children and students. We've looked a bit into how the values expressed in the iconography of the manuscripts can illuminate our ancient spiritual relationship with the community of Israel. Now, let's look into values relating to our love of the land. This is Shir Hamalot from my last book, Kabbalat Shabbat, The Grand Unification, a partnership with Raymond Shendlin from JTS, godfathered, if I can say that, by Art Green. My challenge in this work was to show through the visual midrash how one can live the mystically based traditions and liturgy that welcome our Shabbat without setting aside the concrete mindset of our equally God-given real-world lives molded by daily activity, technology, and science. So here, this is Psalm 126. The psalmist conjures up the experience of the long dreamed of return from Babylonian exile, from the standpoint of someone who flourished following the building of the Second Temple. We, of course, now experience this poem 70 years after another return from nearly 2 millennia of exile. These paintings are full of imagery expressing our history on the land, drawn from archaeology, midrash, and mysticism. But let me draw your attention just to these 2 semicircular paintings. Both paintings use the same landscape, a spot on Kibbutz Yotfatah in the now fertile Negev. At right, the mourning woman Jerusalem from Lamentations traipses away from the scene of destruction. And she can't see that behind her water has begun to flow, and that seeds from that bag that she's schlepping along have begun to germinate in her wake. At left, we flash forward to modern agriculture, where in our restored Jewish state, farmers with tractors work the farms, drawing bounty again from our sacred land. So we feel amazement watching the rebirth of our land, wonder at its beauty, but we feel no less wonder in all the environments that we in the diaspora encounter every day. Surrounded as we are by harbingers of environmental damage, It's crucial to teach our kids and adults not only anxiety, but a sense of wonder, of spiritual wonder, at the beautiful world we inhabit, to build their Jewish environmental ethic through love. Heschel found the roots of Jewish spirituality in radical wonder at the beauty of our world. And it's exactly this wonder that I've conveyed in my forthcoming book, July 15th, 2018, All the World Praises You, a whimsical adaptation of the delightful little medieval classic, Perek Shirah. Wonders of the natural world, beetles, lightning, trees, elephants, and so on, exclaim biblical praises of God in the format of an illuminated Aleph Bet book that appeals in different ways to my toddler granddaughter and Jewish educators of 75 and every age in between. The back of the book offers short commentary for each letter, focused on discussion questions for parents to begin conversation with very young children. And in web-based enrichment materials, I've unpacked the often complex symbolism and meanings of each painting for 3 different age groups: elementary school range, the bar bat mitzvah age, and day school, high school age through adult readers. Everything is completely accessible regardless of Hebrew proficiency and completely non-denominational. I should add, there are going to be ebook versions of this very shortly, and one of them is an audio ebook where you can hear the Hebrew pronounced. So let's look at the values expressed in a few of these paintings. The lightning says, "He makes the storm clouds soar from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rainstorm. He releases the winds from his vaults." The compiler of Perek Shirah placed this verse from Psalm 135 into the mouth of lightning. So we have Bet, Barak, lightning. In the Illuminations, we appreciate God's power revealed in the rush of wind and rain and in the sharp shocks of lightning, as in the ancient notion of the god of storms in Psalm 29. But just visible behind the rain clouds, we have another, far more modern image of God's all-subsuming presence and power, a view of the deep sky adapted from a famous Hubble Space Telescope image from 2014 that takes our view back close to the moment of creation known in astrophysics as the Big Bang. Every level of the book's diving deeper enrichment materials lays out all the meaning and symbolism in each verse and painting clearly for each age level. Moving from the greatest to the smallest now, for Daled, we match the grass under our feet with its ecstatic verse from the Psalm's great paean to the balance of divine creation, Psalm 104. The grass says, "May the glory of the Lord last forever. May the Lord rejoice in his own deeds." The fact that the original compiler of Perek Shirah matched this grand verse from Psalm 104 with something as lowly as grass provokes a certain tension. Biblical texts often treat grass as a great blessing, but others, such as Psalm 37, regard it as insignificant and impermanent. For instance, do not be troubled by evil men, do not be incensed by wrongdoers, for they soon wither like grass, like verdure, fade away. This contrast between great and small, between transient and everlasting, suggests that even the smallest among us can sense and praise the God that enables and suffuses all creation. Moving to Tet, we have Tal, dew, dripping from that lily that we recognize, which always alludes to the value of the 10 Commandments and all Torah. In this verse from Hosea's prophecy, God promises to be as gentle with Israel as the cool dewdrops, to help the returning nation flourish like the blooming lily, and to enable it to sink strong, deep roots into its precious land. I've also added into this book some modern concepts that the original 10th century compiler never knew. For instance, the cell, that smallest integral life form common to every animal and plant. Our Aleph Bet ends with Taf for Ta'in, cells, paired with a culminating verse of the creation story. God saw all that he had made, and it was indeed very good. There was evening, and there was morning, a 6th day. So children of all ages can nourish their Jewish spirituality with radical wonder at the world that God, however you wish to understand the acts of creation, brought into being. I should also say there's a little Where's Waldo game here. In this book, in most of my books, there's a hidden honeybee on each page. Here, as you can see on the left, there's a honeybee and a dahlia on every page. And finally, just for fun, there's a hidden letter puzzle. But you can see that along with all the other letter paintings in the book, which presently, in summer of 2018, you can preview in NetGalley or Edelweiss. Ultimately, what many of us work to convey to our children, our students, and communities is how Judaism, in all its forms and cultures, channels God's wisdom into our daily world. In my paintings of Friday Night Kiddush, we contemplate the fusion of flowing divine energy with the foundation of modern mathematics. The reader finds that the world of our daily life and the world of our souls are indeed one. The message begins with a micrographic border winding through both paintings, presenting the passage from Proverbs 8, in which wisdom describes herself as God's earliest companion since the beginning of his course as the first of his works of old. At right, the 10 wine cups remind us of the wine fountains that many of us use for Kiddush, but there's much more going on here. 10 cups, 10 sefirot, right. Each is painted in a color associated with it in the Zohar. A 12th century Kabbalistic writer I love describes the wine as a symbol of divine wisdom, and as it nears the human sphere, that wine transforms into flowing water, that necessity of human life that, throughout our sources, symbolizes the Torah. And that shapes our daily life as Jews. But the pyramid itself has a deeper meaning. The 10 wine cups are organized in a Pythagorean pyramid, alluding to the origin of Western mathematics and geometry. It's all spelled out in the book. The mystical nature of God and the mathematical nature are one, and divine wisdom flows into our material world as we make Kiddush. So I could go on for hours, but I hope you see how words, color, and gold can fuse in imagery pregnant with the whole panoply of our Jewish history, traditions, and values, and inspire our community's daily lives. Thanks.